Okay, so this week what I want to really kind of focus on and explore is kind of return to the hard surface world a little bit. Okay, so if you go into the week 10 folder on Canvas, so there's three things that we're going to be looking at quite directly in this week. Okay, we're going to start in on a new project, and this is going to be a multi-week project. This is going to be a 3-week project. So we're going to be building a blacksmith shop, a little house. Okay, exterior only. If you wanted to go crazy and build the interior, go crazy. I think that's an awesome, awesome idea. The more detail that we can add, the more believable this object's going to be. But there's no expectation that you do the inside. We're just going to focus on the outside. Okay. Eventually, what we're going to be crafting is ultimately going to be a kind of a cool little diorama that's going to end up on Sketchfab. Okay? And Sketchfab is a wonderful, wonderful tool that will showcase your ability to produce real-time assets, to texture it, have all those textures be applied to the correct materials, and then have them uploaded and rendered in real time on Sketchfab, which is a really cool service. Sketchfab is really becoming the go-to resource when it comes to online portfolios for 3D modeling for the real-time rendering world. Because you get the actual model in front of you, right? You get to turn it, you get to look around, you get to see all the textures and how this process or how this object was constructed. It's just a great service, one of which I think is truly going to be valuable for your professional future. So that's the conclusion of this assignment. It's also going to be the conclusion of our final project. Okay, so it's going to be a big driving element for us going forward. So we're going to ultimately be making a small little diorama. Okay.
So we have to like retopologize this and do like all the stuff we can provide.
Not necessarily. When you're working in the hard surface world, you can kind of skip a couple steps if you need to. Okay. A lot of our existing direct modeling tools inside of Maya don't necessarily require us to retopologize the mesh, although we certainly could. We certainly could. Okay. Yeah, that retopology stage is really dedicated towards the organic workflow. Okay. When we're incorporating meshes from Mudbox or ZBrush, we're going to have to retopologize because the geometric weight of those models are going to be into the millions of polygons, which we just can't support in the real-time world, right? We're in the tens of thousands of polygons in the real-time world. So, okay. So we're going to be making a blacksmith shop, and we'll come back to that here in a little bit. We're also going to continue to work on our texturing today as we explore some more details of Substance Painter. And I have an official lab exercise that you guys are going to get some class time to work on today, which is called the Sci-Fi panel. And then we're also going to use this blacksmith shop sign as kind of an in-class example to help you kind of learn some of the details of smart masks and how we can layer how we can layer materials over in Substance Painter to get a really detailed, high-quality, crisp look. Okay, that kind of begins to suspend disbelief. It's amazing how much information can and should be used with our textures. So we'll be looking at that workflow very, very directly today. In addition, in Substance, we're also going to be talking about projecting images onto our textures, right? Logos and badges really help us understand the human kind of component to this. The blacksmith shop sign is going to be an excellent, excellent opportunity for us to explore that idea, right? On the outside of the shop or the outside of the sign, we want to have some sort of pre-designed logo be projected onto the texture, okay? So we'll talk about how we can set that up, how we can control it, and how we can use that to create a really compelling texture set over in Substance Painter. All right? Sound good? All right. Let's take a look at some of the project files that we're going to be working with here. So I'm going to start with good old blacksmith shop sign. This is just a file. I'm going to download this real fast. It's not very big. Of course, we're all downloading the exact same file now. There it is. All right, so let's just take a look-see at it in good old Maya, and then we'll revisit our checklist. Because this checklist, the pre-prep for Substance Painter is really critical. So we got to get it right, and we have to continue to flex and establish this muscle memory on the back end of our texturing pipeline. Because if we miss certain elements, if we miss certain steps inside of this checklist, it's no going to work, right? Okay, while Maya updates here and loads the project file, let's revisit that checklist, right? Okay. Last week we spent a lot of time talking about the prep of the model, the things that we need to physically do before we can export it from Maya and get it over into Substance Painter cleanly. What were those steps? Yeah. So number one, and my marker is trying to die here. Numero uno. There we go. So we said it, UV maps. Gotta have it. Gotta have it. UV maps. Must have. What's number two? What's the next step? Gotta have UV maps. What's the next step?
This is the process from
Maya to Substance Painter. This is like the prep. We're done with the modeling stage. We're done making our UV maps, okay? And now we need to do a couple extra things to make sure that it goes into Substance correctly. Okay, we're going to get to that. Okay, yes, yes, okay. Yep, there it is. So, okay. So Indigo, what was it? Hard and soft edges, right? We have to go through and manually look at how all of our edge segments are tagged to ensure that the correct smoothing is established across the surface of the mesh. Okay? Hard and soft edges. Got to do that. Okay? One more thing. Bingo. Yep. I'm just going to put materials. We have to look at the materials, right? Yeah, it can be just one. At the very least, we need to be aware of the number of material tags that are currently assigned to our mesh, okay? Now, for my little shop sign here, I want one texture set, right? I want one texture set to describe the details of that shop sign, okay? But maybe for my blacksmith shop, maybe I have two texture sets. One for like the building and another texture set for the ground, maybe the props and stuff. So we are allowed to have multiple textures describing one asset, but we need to be aware that the number of materials that we have currently assigned to our objects is going to be directly translated into the number of texture sets that Substance Painter is going to try to create for us. Okay? We've got to be careful of it. We just got to be mindful of it, right?
Just for the sake of argument, if you wanted to have one texture for the pole, one
Yep.
texture for the chain, one texture for like the sign itself, you could assign three different base materials.
Three different base materials. You got it. You got it. And then you'll see all three of those materials. They wouldn't overlap because the material is now responsible for assigning the textures, not the UVs.
So
Well, the UVs are part of it, but
like in places where the UVs kind of touch, I've noticed when Substance Painter, if you try to paint over one, it automatically like leapfrogs over into the next one. So if you have different materials, it would.
that wouldn't happen. Yep, that wouldn't happen. All right, so these are our four kind of benchmarks that we need to double check. This is our checklist going out of Maya, okay? And FYI, you're going to use this exact same checklist in any of our DCC apps, okay? This is identical in Cinema 4D as it is in 3D Studio Max, Maya, Modo. ZBrush is very not in that group, but it's a very similar process. So it doesn't matter. Even in Blender, you'd be doing the exact same thing in Blender, right? So let's jump in and go through this entire list real fast, okay? And make sure that my little blacksmith shop sign here is ready to go. Okay, so check step numero uno, UV maps. Where do I go to double check the UVs on this? Yeah, so I'm going to select this thing in object mode first, and then up here at I got to go into my modeling menus, UV editor. There they all are. They're looking pretty good, okay? I'm happy with the layout of all of these UVs inside of the grid itself, so this is good. The UVs are perfect. They're all packed, okay? We've been using the not Orient shells, but the layout section down here, the layout tool will pack all of our UVs inside of this positive UV grid, okay? Now, for Substance Painter to work correctly, all of our UVs have to be in this first gigantic grid square, okay? See how it ends on 1 and then vertically is 1 as well? We need all of our UVs in here, okay? Substance Painter is only going to look right in this space. when we're creating our UVs, we're free to use, the entire grid. And I think it often, for me at least, turns into this lovely canvas where I can just put UVs just kind of logically inside the grid as I'm working, just to kind of have, kind of a cognitive connection to their role. But when I'm done, I got to pack them all inside of that positive quadrant using the layout tools. Okay? All right, so UV maps, done. Okay, now, how do I check the hard and soft edges of all of this? Okay, you just look at the edges, right? Now let's expand a little bit on the just look at them idea. And you're right. What are we looking for? And maybe this little spear thing at the top of the bar is more representative.
Yeah, so on the spear, it looks like it's mostly soft edges. The shader is evenly distributed over it, but then in the that section that this is hovering over, yeah, there's a clear,
crisp edge
line where the shading drastically changes.
You got it. So the computer is smoothing across all of these polygons. It's almost looking at them as one surface rather than a whole series of independent faces. To illustrate this a little bit more directly, I think I'm just going to go into the, excuse me. Here, let me reset my workspace here a little bit. There we go. All right. All right, so if I was to grab, let's just say, that entire edge segment, and under the, there it is, excuse me, right here. So if I change it to harden edge, and I deselect it, oops, maybe I didn't grab it. I do this quite regularly. Harden edge. And this particular example is not showing me exactly what I'm looking for. But that's how you'd go in and do it, right? What's that time editor? We don't need that. Okay. So you just want to do a double check. And you do this at the edge level, right? Let's see if I can make it really big. Let's soften them. Oh yeah, they were already hard edges. Okay. So that's what it looks like when they're broken. Especially down there. You can really see it down here, right? Look at how at all soft edges. See how the computer is trying to smooth around that radius. Now, if that's the result that you're looking for, rock and roll. I think that's fine. Okay, I think that's really cool. I kind of like the chiseled edge myself, but if you want everything being nice and smooth, there's no reason why you can't do that. Okay, so if I was to go back in, here's a great little trick, by the way. You see how at the top of each one of these pull-down menus is a little dotted line, okay? So in this step, we're going to be using these two options pretty regularly, right? So if you click on the dotted lines, it kind of tears off the menu into its own floating palette. And now I can just kind of keep this up and open while I go through. Let's harden that edge or soften it. There we go. Yeah, and I can just continue working. There we go. I'm making it worse, but you can kind of see the idea. It's having a big effect down here. So this is all ready to go. I'm pretty happy with the hard and soft edges here. I'm just going to go back in time a number of steps, get rid of all that mumbo jumbo. There we go. Okay, cool. So hard and soft edges, that's done. Okay, that's finished. Materials, where do I go to double check the materials? Hypershade. Yep. You don't necessarily have to select the object, but it helps. You can certainly do it. So if I open up the Hypershade by clicking on the cool shader ball up here, this one's pretty straightforward. It's just got the default Lambert material. Now, one thing that I would recommend that you do is rename these materials so they have some sort of logical connection to the object that you're going to be texturing, right? Because that title, the title of the material that's assigned to the object, is going to follow this over into Substance Painter. So if we were to look at the texture set list over in Substance Painter, it's going to say Lambert 1, which may not be the best name for what we're choosing to do. So I'm going to change this real fast. Select it, and of course over here in the properties, we can change its name. And this is, let's just do shop. Come on now. Why don't you let me change it? It is the default material, so let's do this. Let's just create a new one. I forgot. This is the crazy part about working in Maya sometimes. All right, so here's Lambert 2, and I'll change Lambert 2 to shop sign. All right. I'm just middle mouse dragging that material onto the selected object, and we're good to go. Let's just double check to make sure that it has, in fact, influencing this thing. Oops, that's Lambert 1. I changed the color of Lambert 1 on accident. But the fact that it didn't turn yellow is a good sign. And this is just an OpenGL draw bug. This drives me crazy. If we were to reopen Hypershade, then it reevaluates all the materials and it updates the graphs, which is insanity. Okay, so if you want to see kind of a nice update to your materials, so here's shop sign. Notice that it's this lovely shade of magenta. If I change its color to green, okay, notice that it doesn't automatically just update that object or the tagged materials or the tagged polygons from this material to green. And I think this is a Mac problem. If you close down Hypershade and then reopen Hypershade, all the materials are reevaluated, and now it's green. Okay. All right, so let's get rid of good old, I can't get rid of Lambert 1, but that's okay. Let's put this back to the lovely shade of gray that it was. Not that that color is going to, open up in Substance Painter, but at least we don't have to look at a gigantic green sign. Okay. All right, so this is starting to look pretty good. I'm happy with this. All right, we've walked through the first 3 really important steps in our checklist, and now we're ready to pop out the FBX. Where do we go to do this? What's the system that we're going to employ?
You select the object.
Yep.
And then you go to File, Export, Selected.
You got it. And of course, we're going to export out an Fbx file. Okay. Now, a couple things to remember is that the Fbx file comes with a lot of stuff. It's going to try to package your entire scene. So that means all the lights, all the cameras, all of everything is going to try to go into the Fbx file. I don't want any of that junk hanging out in my Fbx file. So I would absolutely encourage you to go through this include list, right? And, it's like I'm going to turn off the animation. I'm going to turn off the export of the cameras and the lights and the audio and embedded media. I just want the geometry and the UVs going over into Substance Painter. All right, so this is shop sign. Let's hit export. And voila, it's done. Or did I put it on my desktop? Here it is right there. Great. All right, so there's my project file, just chilling. Okay. Let's launch Substance Painter and start talking about the, yeah, go ahead. Okay. Did you close down the Hypershade and then reopened it? Okay.
I tried doing that.
Ah, yeah, select the object first. Okay, now middle mouse.
Oh, middle mouse.
Middle mouse. There you go. Yep. Okay. Let's jump into Substance Painter and start having some fun here. Okay. We're not going to install the new update. And let's create a new project. Okay. I want to import the file that I just saved out. And I want to use the 2048 texture. I want to use the OpenGL specification. Let's see if it works. Voila! There it is. There it is. And now we can start working with this guy. Okay? So I always do a really good double check. I go through the model with a fine-tooth comb, okay, to ensure that what I've created over in Maya is being represented correctly here inside of Substance Painter. So I'm looking for any sort of geometry errors, any sort of weird shading bugs, and I'm pretty happy. Things are starting to look pretty good things are starting to look pretty good. Yes, sir.
How do you do the FBX version?
From Maya? Yeah, so let's go back into Maya. So I always have the object that I want to export out selected in my outliner, or just select it in the view will work just the same. So File, Export Selection. Okay, and then just make sure that the export file, of course, is FBX. If the Fbx file format is not available to you in that drop-down list, it is a plugin. Were you able to find it, Keith?
This is the Fbx Export.
That's it? Yep. That's the one, Fbx Export. If you don't have it on yours, sorry, I'm hovering. Yeah, no, okay. Yeah, if it's not in that pull-down list, it is a plugin. So if you go into Display, Windows, Settings and Preferences, way down here at the bottom, we have the Plugin Manager. And simply, if you just do a search for Fbx, yeah, Fbx Maya, we want all of that. Both of them, the game exporter and the Fbx Maya.bundle. You may have to restart Maya, Meredith, in order for it to work, but that's how you get it going. Okay. Other questions on our checklist before we go any further? So very similar to last week, okay? So this week, what I want to do is continue to kind of add some new features, if you will, into our process. And we're going to be using a lot of the presets that come with Maya, or come with Substance Painter. The point isn't so much the presets, it's the thinking behind the presets. How we can start to stack and layer all these materials together to create a really cool result, okay? To create a really cool photorealistic result. And then we also want to start adding some projection textures into there, okay? We want to start having like a custom logo go on the front of our Blacksmith shop sign, or maybe some text that we could use to go on top of our Blacksmith shop sign, okay? It's really easy and a tremendous amount of fun to do this, but the first thing that we need to do, and I really recommend that you do this initially, is to create and bake all of your mesh maps, okay? On an object this size, it should go pretty fast. There's not a lot of geometry, certainly not a lot of texture information that's going to be created. And it will allow us to get a really good, strong understanding of what the final finished texture is going to look and feel like from the jump, okay? So where do we go inside of our entire system here to begin creating mesh maps?
Why would you need to bake if it's all hard surface? And the detail is not going to change on the actual shape.
What we're getting when we bake the mesh maps are really important details like the curvature map, the thickness map, the global normal map, the ambient occlusion map is used by a lot of our systems to create the illusion of little nooks and crannies in the corners where the light is going to pool. So you get a lot of benefit of baking those mesh maps. Okay. We're going to be looking at something here in a second called smart masking, and smart masking directly is tied to the mesh map system, right? It's probably the most influential thing that Algorithmic has done is this whole mesh map thing. It's quite good. All right, so let's go ahead and do it. You go into the texture set settings area to start baking all of your mesh maps, and they're way down there at the bottom. I'm going to make my interface a little smaller here. There it is. It's under the Bake Mesh Map system. So let's go ahead and start it. Okay. In the popover that you get, there's a couple things in here that we need to consider. All of the mesh maps that are going to be created are going to show up over here in the list. Okay. You know, for the most part, I just leave all of these on. If you only want to bake, when you get more experience and you're more comfortable working inside of Substance Painter and the texture creation process, then you can go back in and start maybe turning these on and off and start looking at their parameters. But the defaults are very, 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 very strong. Okay. Now we don't have a high polygon mesh that we're going to bake from, so there's nothing to import in like we did last week. So we're just going to leave all of this as is. Okay. I always like to go in and change my ambient occlusion rays to 256 just to make them look real good, okay? Yeah, and under curvature, I'm going to disable the seams, okay? That way it's going to kind of ignore all the UV seams on the mesh and bake across them if need be. Let's go ahead and do it real quick.
So what did you do before you disabled seams?
I hit, I increased the number of secondary rays on my ambient occlusion, which is only going to increase the quality of that map. That's all you're doing. I like to think that I'm only going to be baking this thing once. I might as well give it the best bake from jump, right? All right, so this is what my bake looks like. Yeah, I mean, check it out. All of this lovely baked info up here at the top is quite good. We're starting to see some real positive benefits of the ambient occlusion system down here at the bottom. So life is good at the moment. I'm pretty pleased with what I've got. So now we can start advancing into the next stage, okay? Now all of these project level textures are going to be stored over here in our library. And our library is home to more than just the presets, okay? If you look at it, the second thing in the list is this project category, okay? Now these are all the textures and assets that we're currently using for this Substance Painter project. So if we go in there and take a quick look-see, boom, here are all the mesh maps that I just created. And one's, maps like the curvature map. Here's what the ambient occlusion map look like. These are really important little details. Here's the world space normals. These are really important maps that's going to allow us to create some really cool effects and pair it especially with the smart masking system and smart materials, okay? All right. We're going to come back and use this project tab here in a little bit when we start making a logo for our blacksmith shop, okay? All right. So first things first, whenever we start texturing, I think it's a really good practice to think like the craftsperson that'd be responsible for making the sign. We have to stop thinking about the sculpture and physically start considering how it's going to look, okay? What the outside surface color is going to be. Is it metal? Is it wood? Is it clay? Is it hand carved? Is it, is it rusty metal? I mean, how is it physically going to look out there in the real world? These are all things that we need to ask ourselves right now, okay? Last week, when we started this exploration, what was the thing that we did initially? What was the first thing that we fired off? This is a good practice to get into. Fill layer. Fill layer for what? We created masks, and they're kind of tied to the whole fill layer idea. Yeah, so we want to go in and create a whole series of groups, some folders, that will start separating the parts of my entire texture set away from each other. That way I can control and create very quickly, okay? Let's just do it, and this is where we kind of need to start putting our engineering hat on. I think, I want the brackets to be metal, I want the pole to be metal, I want the cap of the pole to maybe be a different metallic texture. I think I want the sign itself to be wooden, okay? But this is just how I'm going to do it. You can do whatever you like, okay? So let's start back in our layers palette now. Let's start making that structure with a whole series of folders, okay? So,
Sorry, how did you get the Fbx into Substance?
File new. File new. So let's just call this the pole. This is the sign. Brackets. And I think I wanted this last one to be, let's just do brass cap. Okay. So I like to create these folders first, get rid of that other layer, just to continue to organize my layer stack. Because we're going to have a bunch of these layers. So it's critical that we kind of are the captains of our own destiny here, right? Only you can prevent forest fires, okay? You need to be able to control how this texturing system is going to work. Folders is a great way to begin. Okay, so I'm going to add a black mask to each one of these just by right-clicking on the word and choosing black mask. Okay. Now, from our conversation last week, this black and white image determines the transparency of whatever it is associated with. Now, this mask is associated with the folder, so it's going to directly influence the transparency of the contents of the folder. It's a great way to organize things quickly. Okay. So we're kind of creating group-level masks that will allow us to just kind of throw in some basic colors and some basic materials. Okay. So let's do brass cap. I got that mask selected, and what tool am I going to use to very quickly mask off? I think kind of like this area of my mesh. Very quickly, I need to go in and make some. I need to put some white pixels down on the mask itself.
White brush.
You could paint it. You certainly could. Certainly could. What's another way of doing it?
Polygon.
Yeah, the Polygon fill tool, which is the number 4 key on your keyboard. It's also that fella right there. The Polygon fill tool is awesome because now it's going to physically start looking at the geometry of our object. You can see all the wireframes turn on. Okay. And over here in the Properties tab, we get to determine how this tool is going to work. The fill modes are going to determine how it's going to look at the geometry. It's going to look at triangles, surfaces. My favorite is, of course, the UVs way over there on the right-hand side. Number 3 is objects, so you can fill by on an entire contiguous polygonal object, which is pretty rad. Let's see, I don't think that my little brass cap here is on its own UVs. Let's confirm it by hitting F2. Yeah, here's the pole itself, so I'm going to guess that one of these, maybe even that one, is its own UVs. Let's find out here in a second. No, it's likely, it's likely that fella right there. Yep. So I'll use the fill by UVs, okay? Drag out a box. Now, to double check, and I'm a big fan of double checking, I want to be able to see exactly what I've masked, right? Our viewer here can be changed to look at a couple different objects. Right now we're looking at the highest level of the viewer. We're looking at the total illusion created by the material itself. However, I can go in and look at individual channels, one of which is the mask, okay? Yeah, there it is. You likey? That's going to be good. I think I'm even going to go as far as doing all of those to be brass. We'll see how that looks, and that's pretty great. Let's go to the next one. Here's the brackets.
Select the other ones.
Say again?
Oh, never mind.
So the brackets and the chain are all going to be one. Again, let's go back into mask. I often just do this in masking mode. There we go. The sign is going to be another one. So voila, we'll even do that one. Now, you know what might be kind of fun? Maybe I've changed my mind here. Maybe I want to have the interior field of my sign be wood, but then the outside frame be a cool metal. That might look kind of fun. Let's do that, right? And this, in every sense, kind of speaks to the fluidity and the organic nature of the tool set here in Substance Painter, right? Instead of having to retexture something way back in Photoshop, I'm just going to go back to the mask, and I want to paint black on the area that I don't want to be influenced right there. Oops. See, it grabbed the back as well. This is why we have access to our UVs, or why we should have access to the UVs. There it is. Oops, that's the wrong one. That was the front. Yep. So, oops, I wanted this one. There it is. Cool. In the 3D viewport, if the developers at Algorithmic are listening, which I know they're not to be, their default selection engine selects through. They need to give me that feature to turn that off because it drives me crazy. Yeah, I don't like it. I like being able to just very quickly drag out a box. I want to be able to stop the whole select through. Some people love it. I'm not in that group. All right, so I need one more folder here for the wooden sign. There we go. Let's add a black mask one more time. And now, I think it's this feller. All right. Oh, I forgot the good old pole. Can't forget the pole. That one and that one. Yep, that's going to work. Okay, let's go back to the material. And I'm also going to hit F2 to look at my model.
So Pat,
Yeah.
real quick, how did you get from, I followed everything else, but you lost me a little bit when you got to the mask and you made it white. You made it black to white.
Yeah, you got it, right? So,
I know, yeah,
so what are you confused about? The process of creating a mask?
I don't know how to make it from black to white.
Right. Okay. So, for example, if I go into the pole, let's just create a problem here. Maybe I messed up. Okay. And I accidentally assigned those two chain links to this group. Okay. This color slider here in your Properties tab will determine the color that you're pasting down, that you're stamping down.
It's white, but if I select the, if I select the end cap,
Mm-hmm.
it won't change.
Are you on the right mask?
Yeah, I'm on brass cap.
Okay.
And then if I do this, it doesn't change color.
Ah, so
That's why I'm
you're doing a different fill type. You're using the Polygon fill. I'm in UV.
Oh, okay.
No, still not doing it. Let's see. Try doing it here. Yeah. Boy, I don't know. That's a good one. I don't know why it's not doing it for you. Yeah, I'm not sure. I really don't know.
No problem. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. And maybe we can smash that bug during lab. All right. Okay. So now that I got this beginning to work the way I want it to work, I can start loading some materials very quickly in these folders to start allowing me to see, how it's going to work. So this is where the creativity of the texturing process begins. This is all the prep. This is the, adding the masking tapes around the window, so when you do start to paint, everything paints the way you want it to work. Okay. So let's have some fun here. I think I'm going to start. Yeah, I think I'm going to start with the sign itself. Okay, because I think that's going to give us probably the larger opportunity here to have some fun and to specifically look at the impact of these smart masks. Okay, so for for this stage, I like to consider and think or try the best I can, right, to get into the mindset of the craftsperson that would have been responsible for making this thing, right? Okay, if you were a blacksmith and you were creating the sign, how would you make it, right? What would it be made out of? Okay, I like to think that everything starts with the base material first, a base kind of object out there in the real world. Was it made out of steel? Is it made out of a whole bunch of lumber, right? What does that look like? What color is it? I'm not going to consider, and I'm not even going to think about the details, the weathering details yet. I want to try to simplify it down into simple material characteristics like wood or metal or ceramic or skin or fabric of some kind. The details of the weathering, that comes later, okay? So we're going to work in the background and work forward to the foreground. And I'm going to initially begin with this outside here. The sign, okay? FYI, I do this because I'm just kind of a super nerd and I like to make sure that everything's been tagged and masked appropriately, okay? I often go through and just create a whole series of fill layers. And I put those fill layers inside of a folder, right? Now what this is giving me the ability to do, and I'm going to turn off all these other channels, is just kind of color tag things, okay? And just really ensure that everything is working the way I want it to work. Okay, so here's red is in the wooden sign. If I open it up, maybe I duplicate this thing. I put this one in the duplicate and sign, change it to green. Yeah, I'm just trying to see pretty quickly here how all of my masks in my folder system are working. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll let you manage that. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah. Thank you.
So that's a good practice to go through, okay? And this is just really kind of a safety test to make sure that everything is working at these folder level masks the way you want them to, right? Maybe I'll bring in a really complex texture that showcases the need at times to do these simple kind of color targets just to help you visualize how your folder system is going to work. Did I show you guys my observatory? I can't remember if it was this class or another class. Showed it in game design, yeah. I have this really crazy model, and I'll bring it in. I'll show it to you guys maybe next week. And it's from a movie called The Dark Crystal. You guys know The Dark Crystal, right? And my favorite part of The Dark Crystal is when the main character goes and meets, the mentor type character. Her name's Agra, and she's kind of like this, immortal being that's been around for 1,000 years. And she lives, and she has created this observatory that tracks the interdimensional kind of positions of all of these planets, okay? And then when all the planets align, this event happens. I'm spoiling the entire film, okay? Anyway, she has this wonderful device in her observatory that I've recreated because it's always been my favorite part, and I've always thought it would be really neat to be able to have a 3D model that you can go and explore this observatory. So I've made that, and I textured it all in Substance Painter, right? And my texture set is kind of ridiculous because there's literally probably, and I'm not joking here, there's probably 200 to maybe 225 individual planets, okay? And they all are different, they all look different, they're all different sizes and, kind of orientations and stuff. It is a geometric nightmare, or actually, it's an organizational nightmare because there's so many different parts and pieces on the damn thing, right? And having a color tagging system in Substance Painter really, really, really helped me because I was able to visualize pretty quickly and understand, okay, everything that's red is going to be brass. Everything that's blue is going to be silver, right? Allows me to color tag very fast and understand how my folder system is going to be eventually used. So it's a good practice. I find it useful, at least. Okay, I'm a simple guy. All right, so clearly I don't want things to be red in this lovely shade of teal, okay? But now I know that my folder system is working, so I can get rid of these fills and get to work, okay? All right, so on this one, we're going to start off here in the corners, okay? And I want to start in the background. Good textures have many, many layers associated with them. There's almost always a raw material that everything in this planet's made out of. This room is no exception, right? Our computers are made out of this lovely, aluminum material that has then, been surfaced, okay? Same goes for our desks. They're all plywood and particle board, right? And then they've been laminated with some sort of, countertop material on top of it, right? However, if we were to take a knife and gouge the top of our desks, we would be exposing that raw material underneath. We want to do the exact same thing with our texture sets, right? We want to be able to chip away the paint, okay? We want to be able to expose that raw material to create a three-dimensional experience with the textures, okay? So I like to start from the background of this material, the raw material, and work my way towards the top, okay? And I think I'm just going to simply use some of the presets just for speed here. And let's see. Let's do this. Let's do iron raw damage. Let's just throw that in there, see what it looks like. Yeah, that's not too bad. Now, we find ourselves very, very quickly in this uncanny valley when it comes to texture sets, okay? In the 3D world, this is a big time problem for us because we can get as close as we want to all of these objects, right? I can get inches, I can get millimeters away from the surface. Often that distance kind of clouds our judgment and it really doesn't allow us to think clearly because we're not seeing the exact same illusion that our audience, our gamers are going to see, right? So whenever we're evaluating whether or not something is working or not, get away from it a little bit, okay? Come back to this range. Get a couple feet away from the texture. Your gamer is never, ever going to be that close to this shop sign, So don't evaluate its awesomeness and its application, that close.
I've seen gamers do crazy things. That's not true. Gamers will inspect everything.
I try to find any broken texture.
Yeah, they will find everything. It's like
All right, so I'm going to swap mine out. And this is really kind of speaks to the power of this entire system. I just swapped out the texture real fast, the base material, okay? And I'm happy with the second one. Didn't need to remask anything, didn't have to repaint anything. That top level group mask is taking care of all of the, this entire system for us. So that's going to be my raw base material. And I'm using, just so everyone's on the same page, I'm using the Steel Rough preset that comes with Substance Painter, okay? Now this is not what I want my surface to look like, right? I want to maybe expose it a little bit more. I want to be able to have, maybe it's going to be some sort of painted metal, and then right around the edges where it's been worn and weathered, we're going to expose this raw material underneath, okay? So what's the top coat going to look like? Well, let's also use another material preset, and I'm a big believer that these presets are an excellent place to begin. Never the end, but always kind of a good place to begin, because they're going to very quickly allow you to establish some surface characteristics that will be close, okay? And then we can go in and change color and a whole series of other things. All right, and let's see. I'm in the wrong section, excuse me. Let's just do, and I'm being too OCD on this. Let's just do, oh boy, let's just do plastic PVC as a starting point, okay? Now, I want this new plastic PVC preset to be, kind of like the top coat for our paint, okay? I can't see it at the moment. What do I need to do? Because all I see is my steel. Yeah, so I'm going to change the layer order, and there it is, okay? And that's starting to look pretty cool. It may be a little too reflective, a little too shiny. This is supposed to be some sort of medieval sign, right? It's not going to have the reflectivity in this lovely kind of lacquered, high-polished clear coat effect that this preset gives me. But that's okay, because I can go in and change these presets. And I certainly don't like the color of this thing, right? So I want to go in and start making some changes, okay? First and foremost, roughness. Roughness is going to be where I'm going to begin, because this is going to allow me to kind of knock out some of that reflectivity. See, with roughness at 0, it's like a mirror, right? I can see, look at the crispness of the reflections coming down on the side here. So I'm going to start to blur those out a little bit. There we go. I want it to be a little shiny, but not a mirrored finish, and that's a pretty good place to go, okay? You could play around with the metallic values a little bit. With a dark color like this, I'm not sure if you're really going to see the benefit of that. And I don't want this to look anodized. Yeah, I'm going to put that back down to 0, because that's not, or I'm not feeling it, as they say. Now I want to start thinking about the color. These presets are an excellent place to begin. One of the things that really kind of excites me about Substance Painter is that a lot of these channels are exposed, and I can continue to customize this preset to whatever I want. I think I want to have maybe the outside be, I don't know. I'm thinking like a logo color now. What about like a nice dark red? That's attention grabbing. All right. That's starting to look pretty good. To help us really kind of visualize and understand this, I'm going to add just a simple wood preset to the wooden sign folder, just to kind of get us going here. Okay, let's just do wood walnut. Oops, I didn't put it in the folder. That was entirely my fault. There we go. That's starting to look pretty great. We'll come back to the wood walnut here in a second. But with it not being white, I can kind of evaluate a little bit more directly this next step. Okay, so if you look at what I got here, patiently wait while it saves. I got this red metal, I got this wood field, the wood grain's going the wrong direction, which is really bugging me, but we'll fix that here in a minute. But now I want to start integrating this. I mentioned before that the power of working with inside of Substance Painter is to physically create all of these material layers within inside the scene, okay, within inside of our texture set. I want to begin to expose all that lovely steel raw metal beneath my red paint layer, right? Because what I've created here is kind of the illusion that I've spray painted the outside, or I've painted the outside of the frame red, but I want to start to expose some of that lovely raw metal texture underneath it, right? Now, luckily for us, our masking system will allow us to do this quite wonderfully, okay? Last week, we spent some time talking about how we can go in and create masks. We've already done it once today with the creation of a group level mask. I can also go in and continue to mask this guy. Let's just do it real fast. Let's create a black mask. Now the red's all gone. And I certainly could come in with a really great brush. Go. And paint this in by hand. You could absolutely do this. Let me just find a good old, what are we going to use? Let's do ink splatter. Not ink splatter. That's horrible. Let's use one of the dirt brushes. Let's just use dirt 1. Oof. That's not so hot. And really what we're seeing here is we're seeing the impact of that red material underneath it. Maybe instead of starting with a black mask, I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to add a white mask. That way I expose all the red, and then I could come in with a black or with a white paintbrush, with a black paintbrush, and chip away at it, right? Maybe I can go in and say, ooh, that's growing a tumor. So on this particular one, let's just turn off the height. There we go. So I can do this a little bit faster. There we go. So I can go in and customize this and go crazy, okay? And create the illusion that maybe the edges are a little bit worn out, okay? And begin to expose all that lovely kind of layering in the system. That's a lot of work, okay? That's a lot of work. And to do it all by hand, it's not the end of the world, but if I can get through this process a whole lot faster, I would much rather do that, okay? Thus enter smart masks. And smart masks are a great way to utilize all that lovely mesh map information that we baked at the first step in this process into an existing mask structure that we have in our layers palette, okay? Let me show you what this looks like real fast. I'm going to go back over into the mask that's responsible for my red paint, okay? And I'm just going to add a black mask. So now it's all been cleared out. We haven't deleted the red. We've just turned all of its pixels off, okay? One of the cool things about working inside of Substance Painter is the inclusion of these smart masks. Now, these are presets, but they're darn good presets, okay? I'm a big believer that if you don't find what you're looking for here, you don't know what you're looking for, okay? Because these presets are kind of our go-tos, and they're quite good. So what these presets are going to do, they're actually going to create a whole series of, it's going to create a mask editor and a very complex filter and some really great effects on the back end that's going to access all of those mesh maps that we created. Specifically, the curvature maps, the thickness maps, the ambient occlusion map that we created at the beginning of this process. It's going to use that information as to drive the mask itself, okay? So if you look at the thumbnails here, you get a really good idea as to what the mask is going to look like, okay? And how the mask is going to potentially look on the mesh itself. So I'm looking down here at the bottom row. These in here are really going to expose just the corners. It's going to look at that curvature map that we baked at the beginning of the process, and it's going to mask according to that. Adding smart masks are really easy, okay? Let's just do edges strong real fast. And I'm going to let you, so first things first, and I apologize for skipping over this. The first thing you got to have is a mask, okay? Got to have it, because we're going to load a smart mask into an existing mask, okay? So you got to have a mask. I got my mask going on my paint layer. And now I'm going to left click and drag my smart mask from the preset library into that little blue square over there. Boink. Voila. Okay. Cool, huh? and it did that automatically for us. Now, it's maybe a little heavy-handed, and I think it's kind of the opposite effect of what I want, right? I don't want to expose the red. I want it to be generally red, but just the edges be silver, okay? So what do I need to do to my mask? We need to invert it, okay? We need to flip the colors. This also speaks to the power of working inside of Substance Painter because all of these functions are exposed and available to us. So check it out. Over inside of our layer stack, we have a couple new things. Here's our mask editor. These two things were part of that preset that we just used. If we go into the mask editor and select it, all of the mask properties down at the bottom are going to be exposed. And then check it out. First one, global invert. This is great. Whoop. Yahtzee. Done. Right? And now we're getting closer to what I'm looking for. That's looking pretty stellar, right? Looking pretty great. Shoot, maybe I don't like what's happening here, okay? I'm just going to start deleting some stuff. I'm hitting the wrong keys. There we go. Let's delete both of those two things. Maybe I want to try a different effect, like edges rust. What's that look like? That's sweet, right? Now there's a little bit more interior detail, so we can pick and choose, okay? These smart masks are a great, great way for us to quickly throw down a tremendous amount of compelling detail, okay? Especially, and we'll have to come in and fix the back, okay? Especially with all these different layers, because now instead of having to paint the exposure of the red, I'm just masking it out, and it's just exposing just that raw metal underneath. Now I got some problems back here, specifically this, okay? I don't want the back to be all steel, right? So in every sense, my smart mask kind of broke a little bit. It did too good of a job and it didn't mask out the back, or, well, it did mask out the back, but I'm not getting the creative result that I want. I want the back of the sign to also be red, okay? So I need to edit and change the effect here to get what I'm after, okay? Well, check it out. This is what's neat about working with masks, okay? If we click on it, you see how what we're going through here is a whole series of different effects. We can add these effects up at the top. The magic wand will allow us to add an effect, okay? So all three of these are effects. We have a fill effect. We have a couple of mask editors. I'm going to add in a paint effect, okay? So now with this paint effect in tow, I'm just going to go in. I'm going to load in just a basic soft brush here. I'm on the mask, okay? And I want to paint back where I want to have red, okay? To make this go faster, I'm just going to go to the mask. There we go. Now you certainly could, make a bigger brush. I'm maybe perhaps going through this a little too gingerly. Point being is that we get to stack these effects to control the result that we're after. We're not limited to what the smart masks gives us. Like our material presets, they're just a starting point. It's going to adopt and honor the order of the effects in the layer stack itself. It's going to start at the bottom and work its way up towards the top. So if you have a paint layer at the top of your effects stack in your layers palette, what that will effectively do is kind of create like a fix layer. So we can go in and customize and fix things and just get it exactly where I want it to go. And that's looking pretty good. Hit the M key to go back to the material itself. Yeah, now it's all red on the back. And we're getting that lovely chipped look on the front. Cool, huh? You even turn them on and off. You can see exactly how it's building it up. Okay? So these smart masks are a great way for us to go in and add a tremendous amount of detail. Okay? All right, last thing, and then we're going to take a break, because I know I've been going for an hour or so. okay? More than that, more like an hour and a half. I want to talk about textures, okay? We always want to be able to add logos and badges into our texture sets, okay? Believe it or not, the absence of logos and the absence of text completely dehumanizes an entire environment. So it's something that we kind of almost subconsciously look for. You walk across campus, you're going to see 10 different banners with a half a dozen signs, and we see them everywhere. In human-created, man-made objects, we should always be looking for opportunities to add logos and badges. If I've learned one thing about humanity, we always love to sign our work. Okay? No matter what we create, we're always going to find an opportunity to leave our own kind of fingerprint, our own little DNA on the objects that we craft, right? Sometimes it's really subtle, sometimes it's pretty outrageous. I'm a big fan of signing your work, especially when it comes to 3D stuff, 3D models, right? Sign your work, find a creative way to sneak your name in there, right? When I worked at MTV, we had one of the music videos that we did had this huge, long alleyway. And our main character was walking down the alleyway, right? And all the 3D modelers and the production artists on the crew were always looking for creative ways to sign our work. And I should see if I have that shot still somewhere. But if you look carefully on the renders that we created, there was actually a couple different alleyways. Well, all of the artists went in and we created our own graffiti logos, and then we put that texture on the walls. So the graffiti that lines the alleyways are actually all the names of the artists that worked on the show itself, right? So always look for ways to sign your work. It's a lot of fun. I sat next to a guy for a while that took every opportunity to put his name in everything that he did, right? He made a model of a Coke bottle, right? And then he found the Coca-Cola font somewhere online, right? And if you look at it real quickly, it just looks like a glass Coke bottle. It looks identical. Materials are great, textures are great, but if you look carefully, the label doesn't say Coke on it. It says Zacca-Cola. And I was like, I gave him a high five for that. I thought that was pretty rad. Anyways, all right. So, badges, okay? Logos and badges. Now, for logos and badges to work, we have to incorporate a new system into the mix here, okay? We can and probably should pair it with some masking. We'll look at that here in a second. But really what we need to start exploring here is called projection painting, right? And I'm going to use just some of the preset stuff that comes with Substance Painter to get going here, right? So let's just go not into textures. I'm in the wrong area. Let's see the procedurals. Let's see if we can find something here. Just looking for a logo that I can paint. I think of the procedural section. Boring. Alphas. This will work. Yes, I want to do something crazy. Let's just use one of these fun symbols, like this kind of Celtic cross thing. That's a good logo for kind of our medieval blacksmith shop that we're working with. Okay, that's a good place to begin. So I want to use this logo. I want to paint this logo in here. Did you guys ever make kit models in the past? I grew up making kit models. That's actually how I got my start. And this whole system kind of reminds me of making decals for kit models, right? They come with, if you look at kit models, you have kind of like a decal sheet, right? We slowly either peel the decals off and kind of press it on the model, okay? Or we use little stencils and kind of airbrush, on the inside of that. Well, we're kind of replicating that entire system here with projection painting, okay? So I want to go in and ensure that, or I want to paint this little Celtic cross logo in the middle down here, right? Now with our classic brushes, we can't do that, right? So I'm going to go into my wooden sign layer, okay? And let's just create a simple paint layer, okay? As we know from simple paint layer days, simple paint layers just allow us to go in and paint a material, right? Oops. Let's see what's going on. Oh, I put it in the wrong folder. I was like, why is this not working? There we go. So just go in and paint on the model itself, right? Now, ideally, I need to load this image underneath my brush, right? I want to have kind of like a stencil that I'm airbrushing through to get the shape that I'm after. And this is called projection painting. Okay? So this is our simple paintbrush. Someone asked last week if there's an eraser tool. Yep, there's the eraser tool. And then this is the projection painting tool. Okay? Now with projection painting enabled, you see that we get kind of this little square showing up inside the interface, right? And the thing that we need to do is that we need to load an alpha into that area. So I'm double checking everything here. Yeah. So over in my properties, see how it says alpha? So we got all the brush properties up here. And then if we keep cruising, then we get to the alpha shapes. Okay. I want to use, let's just do this one since it's right here. If I left click and drag that in there, okay, it doesn't work because this is not the right system, not alphas. I always do this. It's stencils. Thank you. Brush, alphas. Why am I not seeing stencils on this one? Hold on a second. I'll get there. There we go. Because you got to drag it in. I always do this. I want to put it in the alpha mostly because of other areas that I work in. If you're working in ZBrush, you put it in alphas, and Mudbox, if you want to load something underneath your object, it goes into the alpha slot. But here, instead of Substance Painter, you need to drag it into this base color section, okay, with the projection painting tool on. So just drag it in, yoink, and now that shape is going to show up in this big square, okay? So we're using a stencil. Now, there's a couple things we can do, and it's admittedly kind of strange, I get it. We need to position our canvas, okay? What we're doing is we're creating a screen space alpha. So our stencil is always going to be locked to kind of our view of our three-dimensional scene, and our model is going to rotate behind it, okay? So we need to orient the model so that it kind of matches how the stencil is going to be stamped down onto the mesh itself, okay? It takes a little bit of practice, and it certainly does take a little bit of energy. If you want to edit the size of your stencil, you got to hold down the S key. And then middle mouse button will allow you to change its position, and right mouse button will allow you to make it bigger or smaller, okay? In addition, I always like, whenever I'm doing projection work, I always like to get it out. I like to get my 3D viewport out of a perspective view and into an orthographic view to make sure there's no kind of stretching or tearing happening on the projection of the stencil on the mesh itself, right? And you can do this, and I would really encourage you to do so. It's the, So if you go up here, okay, perspective view is F5, and orthographic view is F6. And I actually kind of prefer working in that orthographic view. I'm tumbling. If I hold down Shift, it's going to snap it to orthographic angles. See how it's doing that? Holding down Shift as I tumble, okay? And now I know pretty directly that I'm looking at my front view. There we go. And let's line up my stencil. Hold down the S key. Cool. I'm liking it. And now I can just paint. Oops, I'm painting with gray. No, I'm painting with, let's say, this is my fault. Brush. Really what I want is I want to collapse all this. I don't have a good alpha anymore. Here, let me just load in the basic brush again. I'm sorry. That way, all the basic brush properties will be restored. There we go. All right. Now, why is it doing that? Because that's not what I want at all. It worked, but it didn't work. Ta-da! However, we have some blending issues in here that we really need to examine, right? Because that's not so hot, right? That's not so hot at all. Massive thumbs down, okay? Here's my suggestion, and once you paint it, we can't control it, right? Like, at all, which is a big time bummer for us, okay? It's taking the actual color of the stencil and it's stamping it down on the object itself. The colors of the stencil, that little cross thing, is black and white. It's blending that black and white image on top of some wood, and it's just not looking good at all, right? So here's my suggestion to you, okay? Don't use these projections on paint layers. Add them to a mask, right? The stencil is black and white. Our masks are black and white. And so that kind of makes sense, right? Check this out. I'm going to delete my wood. Now what I'm going to do is instead, and this is kind of a little bit more of a better way of working, I'm going to add a fill layer, put it inside my folder, right? Put it on top. And I'm going to just make it just a really, really kind of god-awful shade here, just so it's super noticeable. We'll make it magenta, right? Lovely shade of purple. Whoa, it's a lot of purple, okay? And now I'm going to mask it. Bloop. There we go. Okay. I got my mask selected here. And let's do the exact same thing that I did before. I'm going to go back into my, was it alphas? I use that one. Okay. Let's just throw it in. There's the stencil. Things are looking good. I'm painting with white. So now when I paint, yep, now I'm painting in a black and white image into a black and white mask, and it's showing up here correctly on the texture set. Okay. Voila. Let's go back to our, let's get out of this, right? Don't need that stencil anymore. And things are good. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. And since we're just painting a mask, I could go back to the fill layer and do some art direction after the fact, right? Maybe I want to have the color of my purple logo match the color of my rusted metal. As close as we can. There we go. And at the very least, I got some blending things in here, but it's looking pretty good. Okay. Let's do that again. So when you're working with masks, you want to load an image into the stencil downstairs. And let's do it. Let's do something else. Let's have some fun here. Let's do these little circle dots. Yoink. Maybe I want to have like a perfect circle.
I'm having an issue that when I activate the projection tool, it takes away all of my properties.
It takes away all of your properties. Okay.
Not all of my properties, but I'm not really sure how to explain it, so I have it set up about the same as you guys are set up.
You know, and I apologize. I'm not using the projection tool. I'm using the paint tool with the stencil. I misspoke earlier. And that's my if you wanted to use like a color image, like if you made your own logo over in Photoshop, then you'd want to use the projection tool, right?
I'm not seeing a stencil.
Say again?
I'm not seeing a stencil.
Okay. So are you using a mask?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go through this process uno more times. Let's get rid of my stencil, right? Let's do it on the material that's responsible for my sign, my metal sign, okay? Because it's already got a mask on there.
Yep.
So when I select mine, stencil is there on my mask.
It has to be a fill layer, not layer.
Yes, yeah, no, and that's the big difference. Absolutely. This is on a fill layer, not a paint layer. Fill layer is good. Paint layer is very, very bad.
Where do we drag the stencil?
Right here. Where it says stencil.
Can you not just use the alpha as a brush?
You can. So, yeah, and you certainly could do that.
Does it lose a bit of?
It doesn't lose anything. It's the difference between having a brush-based alpha or a brush-based stencil and a screen-based stencil, right? Because this stencil is always going to be matched to the orientation of my screen in relationship to the model, right? Let me show you the other example of this. And this model may not be the best one to illustrate this because it's relatively flat. But up here at the top, let's do this, okay? To answer that question, I'm on my mask. I got to be on a different layer here.
Are there?
Let's do.
Like guides, just so you know that, like, say, just something centered in your sign.
Not that I'm aware of. So I'm on my pole layer now. So the question was, what about like a brush alpha? Let me load in a brush. I'll just use the basic hard brush. Okay. Now this is the alpha that it's using, which is just black. It's just a circle. Okay. Now I don't have a material in here, so bear with me just for 1 second while I add a material to my pole layer. I'll make it bright red so we can see it. All right. So on the mask itself, and I'm just going to add this as a black mask instead of a white mask. There we go. All right, so I'm in just the standard brush tool. If I go into the brush settings and load in an alpha for the brush, so this is, see how the brush tip is changing its orientation based off of the geometry? That's a brush-based stencil. So it's analyzing the geometry. Our screen space stencils aren't going to do that kind of warping in orientation. It's always going to be locked to the perspective of the screen. So let me go back into not textures. Where was it? It was under alphas. Yeah, F6, and then while you're tumbling, hold down the Shift key, and it will snap to the orthographic views. Yeah, here we go. Now you can really see that brush space alpha. Let me throw in this hexagon shape alpha. Why not? Okay, cool, right? See how it changes its stamp pattern based off the orientation of the brush? That's a brush-based stencil, okay? Which is cool, and there's a lot of really great reasons for this. It's just different. It's just different. I use these brush stencils all the time. So you got to clear it. You got to clear it, and it'll go away. I just cleared it. It's always going to be in there. So under the alpha section, you either got to load a new alpha or fundamentally just clear it just by hitting the little X. All right. So here's what I would like you to do for this week's lab assignment, is to continue these ideas. If you return to Canvas here real fast and look at the Week 10 module on Canvas, I've provided you guys with a really cool science fiction tile. This thing, let's take a look at it real fast. And your job is to create a texture for this thing, okay? I've given you the model file. It's right down over here. Let's take a look-see at it real fast. It's a Maya file, so you have to go through our little checklist like we did before to ensure that we can export it from Maya cleanly, okay? There's the panel itself. Looking pretty great, okay? It's got all the UVs there. You're welcome, okay? And so your job is to create a texture for this, okay? Now, something science fiction-y, it's more than just trying to establish the weathering effects, the rust, the scratches, and what have you. Think about adding some badges in there, some logos. If you look at these samples that I've provided you from past student projects, there's some good ones in there that really start to create some compelling ideas. I mean, look at this one. This is the one, I did this one a long time ago in a Galaxy. I did all this in Photoshop, by the way, right? So I wish I could do this again in Substance Painter, but you know, there's caution signs. If you look at the full texture set itself, there's a lot of text on here, some other additional logos. Use this stencil and projection system to add this level of humanity into the texture set itself. Also, bake your mesh maps. Use those smart masks. They are helpful. They're probably the fastest way to get to a great, quick result. Okay? Make sense? Everyone, when you're done with this, please just make sure you make a good iRay render and submit the iRay render back to Canvas when you're done. Okay? I tell you what, this it's 2:50. Let's make sure you take a little break. Okay? And then right at 3:15. Okay? Or 3:10, excuse me, right at 3:10, we're going to start talking about your homework. Okay? Okay, so I wanted to show you one more thing about these stencils that I forgot to add earlier, which is a pretty neat effect. So if you look, I just changed the color of my little symbol here from red to this lovely shade of green, just to make it a little bit easier for you guys to see the effect itself, okay? Now, right now, my fill layer is just influencing the color channel, okay, the color channel of this material. It's not having any sort of role on these other ones, okay? Now, this is where it gets a whole lot of fun. What if we were working on like the metal and we wanted to make it look like an embossed metal? Like maybe that there's some sort of pattern physically stamped into the metal, or maybe like burned into the wood or something, right? 1,000 different creative options. Well, check this action out. As an illusion exclusively, I'm going to turn off the color. Boop. Okay, now it doesn't look like it's doing anything. However, I'm going to turn on height, which is kind of like the real-time rendering version of a bump map, okay? Now, at the moment, boop, now I get that embossed look, right? And that has everything to do with I was playing around with it. When the height value, excuse me, let me get rid of all this. When the height value is at 0, no effect, right? But if I start moving this slider up, now it's taking the black and white characteristics of that layer and creating relief, okay? Surface height. And I can really drive it up. This is just a camera trick. It's not actually creating height on the map, but it's just creating the illusion of some sort of embossed punching out. Negative values look like it's punching in. Of course, you can do this exact same thing with any number of objects. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to go in and add a paint layer, or excuse me, a fill layer. Put it in my wooden sign area. Okay, but let's do this. I'm going to load in. Let's turn off roughness, metal, and normal, and I'm going to turn off height just so you guys can see what's going on. And I'm in the procedural section. Let's just do something wacky, like this dot pattern. Why not? Okay. So now we got dots all over the place. These procedurals are wonderful because we can continue to go in and influence it. So maybe the tile values can get smaller. Okay. Awesome. But I don't want it to influence the color. I want it to influence the height. So if I turn height on and then adjust its height value, I can now use that texture or not. Oh, I'm sorry. My fault. Entirely my fault. I got ahead of myself. Paint layer. Then we got to add a mask to it. Excuse me. I always do that. And then on the mask itself, this is where we want to put the fill. Okay. Let's drag that in. There it is. We're starting to see it. It's blending the way we want, which is good. Of course, the blend doesn't make a huge look of difference because we're going to use the black and white properties of the mask to drive the height effect itself. Okay. So if I go back to the fill layer itself and turn off height, roughness, metal, normal, all that jazz, that's what we're left with. Cool. At the very least, I can go in and make all the dots red, but that's not really what I'm after, right? I want to turn my color values off, my height values on, and now I can get that pattern popping in, okay? Which is pretty neat, because textures are more than just, the skin color, if you will. It's more than just how what the car paint color looks like. We're able to create the illusion of shadows and highlights through these heights, and then we'll talk about normals going forward in a minute, probably next week. Pretty neat, pretty neat. Okay, let's go back and look at our homework this week. Our homework this week is a blacksmith shop, and this is going to be really a 3-week project. We're going to kind of step away from characters for a bit. I think we're kind of overwhelmed with characters. We just need to take like a little mental pause and just do some hard surface stuff. Now, this is going to be a 3-week project where you're going to be designing the models, the textures, and then publishing the textures and the model to Sketchfab on week 3. Okay. And luckily, the Sketchfab service is free to students, which is awesome. It's a great way for us to create a portfolio website of our 3D models. Okay, so if we go to the Week 10 folder on Canvas, we're going to be making a blacksmith shop. You are encouraged and free to look and to create whatever blacksmith shop you want to make. Okay, this is your exterior house. It doesn't even have to be a blacksmith shop, right? I chose a blacksmith shop because there's a lot of reference out there for a blacksmith shop. Seemingly in every video game on the face of the planet, regardless of genre and time period, there is some sort of space that creation of objects happen, right? Which is really what a blacksmith shop is all about. This is where they make stuff, okay? So it's a good place to kind of begin. And there's a lot of reference, and it's going to be very easy for us to collect some ideas on what this space is going to look like. So this is going to be your project, and you get to make your space however you'd like. This is an excellent portfolio piece, because when you start looking for jobs out there in the real world as 3D modelers, you know, someone that can do hard surface and soft surface, the textures and the UVs, those are like unicorns, okay? So if you can do all of those things really well, you will get a job in a heartbeat, okay? Because every production studio, every game design and development studio is going to want to hire you, okay? So this is a good practice to get into. Let's kind of talk about the thinking behind this, okay? And this is my blacksmith shop, okay? Whenever I'm designing something from scratch, of course, reference is always going to be the key to kind of everything that we do, right? I actually got lucky and I found some really great reference of a blacksmith shop online, and I used that as my launching pad. But when I'm fleshing out the model, I'm using that reference as a guide, kind of loosely sticking to it. But the initial stage of creation should just be kind of a conceptualization of the spatial relationships between all these parts and pieces. Point being, or maybe what I'm trying to say here, is that I'm just trying to figure this out, right? I'm trying to figure out how all these basic shapes work together to create what eventually is going to look like a house, okay? I'm not thinking about the UVs, I'm not thinking about the topology, I'm just thinking about shapes. I'm returning to that kindergarten mindset where, you know, basic building blocks can be transformed in our imagination into castles and spaceships, right? How do simple shapes translate into something that looks more complex, okay? So I almost always do a layout version of every house I make. This takes me about 5 minutes to make, just pushing and pulling things around. I'm not thinking about creating a perfect model. Actually, this is far from it. Here's a great example. If you look at the geometry way up here, it kind of tapers at the top. I don't care. At this version, I'm just kind of, you know, if you've ever seen people do pottery, okay, they literally just take a gigantic lump of clay and they throw it down on the wheel, right? And they just start spinning the wheel and they start pushing out some basic forms with their thumbs. That's kind of what I'm doing now, right? I'm just trying to get something down so I can explore and see how it's working, right? I'm not worried, nor am I thinking about making a final finished model. That time will come. So everything, I mean, like great example. I'm not, you know, these parts up in here aren't connected. You know, I got some massive geometry issues here. Some of it's extruded. I got a lot of intersecting polygons where these things aren't matching up. I mean, geometrically, look, you can even see the polygons popping through the top here, right there. I'm not trying to make a good model. I'm just trying to make a good sculpture first, right? A good idea. Once I feel like it's working, okay, then I begin to advance on to the next stage where I create a real rough model. So this is kind of like the layout. This is the concept, okay? I'm trying to see if this crazy idea is working in 3D before I really take it to the next level. All right, so then I start taking that to the next level of detail, okay? And this is where I really am beginning and in honest, trying to make a good mesh, right? I'm starting to put in some compelling details that I know my audience is going to see. I'm starting to make really good geometry that's clean and consistent and that will be renderable in either a real-time rendering engine or you know, in our offline renderers here, right? This is ultimately the model and that is going to be the foundation for the rest of my modeling process. So I'm honestly starting to think about topology. I'm trying to make sure that all my verts are aligned, that we don't have any sort of interpenetration on the mesh that's causing some problems. I'm actually striving to create some good geometry in this model. In the production of this, a lot of Booleans were used to punch out the windows. My vertex snapping system was employed to give me some great accuracy in the placement of all these little chunks of geometry that creates the trim going around the windows. So I'm trying my best to make a good looking model. Definitely not perfect, but it's starting to get there. And I got some material assignments that are all over the board here right now, but that's okay. All right, actually have some, remembering this is not supposed to be there. That was actually a layout piece. Okay, both of those are not supposed to be there. That was to help me figure out how some of those supports were going to work. Yeah. So we're getting there, right? We're starting to craft something that's going to look pretty neat over in the game. Okay. Now I'm not done with this. Okay. If we keep going, this is starting to look like it's supposed to look. I'm starting to add more compelling detail that's going to suspend disbelief. Now I know a lot of these ideas that I've just kind of turned on here seems like a crazy. It's like, Pat, are you really modeling every single board? Yeah, I'm modeling every single board. Okay. The geometry is not where the weight is. If you think about these boards, they're just really just glorified cubes that have, I think, maybe 2 edge loops on the interior of each individual board that allows me to customize their shape. Okay. See how every board is just a little bit different from each other? That's intentional. Let's turn on. There we go. Now we can see it. That's intentional. Okay. There are no straight lines in nature. No 2 pieces of board are identical in shape and size. So you just go in and very quickly, this is when you put your headphones on, right? And you just very quickly just kind of jam out for 10 minutes as you're moving edge segments left and right. And I don't even actually kind of try to think about it, right? Because if I started to think about it, then I'm going to be doing the exact same pattern over and over and over again, right? As I'm moving these small little edge segments around to make it look and appear a little bit more organic, okay? So this is starting to look pretty good. I got some things left in here to do. I'm not actually done with this stage, but we're getting there. We're getting there. Okay. The next part of this is to go in and do all the roof tiles and get that kind of situated as well. The roof tiles are going to be big and chunky on this particular model. So I'm going to choose to use geometry to define that instead of going in and using a texture. But luckily a roof tile. How many polygons is a roof tile? Yeah, I'd say 5 or 6 in all honesty. It's going to be pretty simple stuff. So not too many. You times that by about 50. That's still, geometrically, that's something that's reasonable for an art asset in this generation of computer graphics. Okay. Okay. So work in stages. Don't try to sit down and initially create a high resolution, good looking art asset from moment one. Walk through a process. Explore. Make some decisions. Walk away from that exploratory, the exploratory stage for an hour or 2, and then come back to it and say, was I going down the right track or the wrong track on this model, right? Was it working? Do I still feel as emotional about this model now as I did a moment ago, right? All good questions to ask as we go through this process, right? There's going to come a time to commit. But give yourself some separation between the initial conceptual stage and the production stage. A day or 2 actually gives you a whole lot of clarity on the work that you've done. I can't tell you how many times I've opened up a project file and I go, what was I thinking? This is a horrible idea, right? This is a horrible idea. We want to go through those iterations pretty early on, right? So that when it comes time to UV mapping and texturing it, we know that we're spending our time on an art asset that looks pretty stellar. Okay. So this week for our homework, your job is to create the model. Don't worry about the UVs. We're just trying to create a darn good looking model. Okay. This is going to be, you are expected to make UV maps for all of this. Okay. You are going to be texturing all of this. So keep that in mind as you start to create this shape over the next couple days. Okay. I would really, really recommend that you try to find a shape that's interesting. A glorified box is not going to attract the attention of an employer. Okay? Have in your mindset, in my opinion, your mindset should be one of, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm attracting an employer at the end of this process? Okay? You're not making these models for me, you're making them for you. Okay? If you'd be making them for me, this would be a very different assignment. So you're making them for you and for your portfolio. So put some care and some love and attention into them, right? Because these are the samples that will hopefully land you that job once you leave Sacramento City College. All right? Make sense, everyone? Kind of clear understanding of what it is the expectations are for this week's homework assignment. The lab assignments, that sci-fi panel, you probably can knock that out before you leave today in the next hour. And then over the next 7 days, start making this model. Okay? Or a model of a blacksmith shop.
Do you want us to try to keep it in like a medieval blacksmith look? Or
Whatever you want to do.
Kind of forge?
Just some kind of forge. It doesn't even have to be a forge. This is kind of a starting spot. I think last semester someone built this kind of like a really cool house, which is fine too. an exterior location. An exterior location.
What do you get to snap it into an orthographic view?
Hold on the shift key while you're tumbling. Okay? All right, ready, set, go. Let's get to work.